SNAICC advises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that the following episode of Kids, Culture, Community, SNAICC Yarns contains references to topics that may be triggering to the community. Your social and emotional safety is important. If this recording has brought up any concerns for you, please contact 13Yarn on 139276.
Welcome everyone to SNAICC Yarns with Catherine Liddle, the CEO of SNAICC. I'm Mandy Taylor, the Executive Director, Office of the CEO at SNAICC. I get tired saying that title. It's really long. I'm going to have to think of a shortcut. Catherine Liddle, but welcome. And can you give us an acknowledgement of country?
Absolutely. What a privilege. I acknowledge that today I am sitting on the lands of the Wurundjeri, part of that incredible Kulin nation here on Narrm. It's interesting, Mandy, as you were saying, as you were giving our titles, I was like, oh, man, do we really have to hear our titles again? Couldn't we just say, hey, it's Mandy and Catherine?
Yeah, we can. Hey, it's Mandy and Catherine. And, of course, we're coming to you on the other side of the federal election. Phew. Well, Catherine Liddle, we're sitting opposite each other, face to face.
Yeah.
Same city, same room. This is unusual.
It is, particularly when you consider that we live in the same town.
It is. Shh, don't tell anyone that. And we're not even in the town we actually live in,
No.
Mbuntua, Alice Springs. We're here in Narrm in Melbourne.
Beautiful Narrm, and she has turned on the most incredible day. The clouds are an incredible silver and grey. And then there's this beautiful blue coming through the clouds, and the landscape in front of me is one of both city and trees. And what an incredible landscape that makes. It's like you might have a city here, but the country still has its presence and the trees still have their strength. And for me, that says a lot about the country that we're sitting on.
It is. It's really beautiful, even though, like you, I'm a desert rat. Mm-hmm. Love my desert country and the hues and the reds and the oranges and the purples. But getting to see these different, particularly the big urban landscapes, well, like you said, there's still flashes of green and flashes of country, and the river as well. I really love the river here.
The Yarra, love the bays.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you say that, because I was in Sydney last week and I was travelling through one of those tunnels, and anyone who knows me knows travelling through tunnels is not easy for me. And there was this moment where I felt comfortable and I looked around the tunnel and I went, you know what? Even with this incredible grey of concrete buildings, this country is still beautiful. And it was at that moment in time that my body just sort of settled down when I went, you know what, I can still see what the lands of the Camaragal mob and the Eora Nation mob had. And even in that grey tunnel, it made me feel calm.
You know what, I'm going to do what I think is a really clever segue here. Coming out of tunnels, we've just come out of an election tunnel.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
And it does feel like coming out of a tunnel, this one, doesn't it?
It does. And again, if I reflect on that feeling of going through that tunnel last week, maybe that's the reason, because it was feeling pretty heavy. I am not going to lie, it felt heavy. The faces of the people around me looked distressed. The conversations were one of distress. And that was only coming from the Aboriginal community. That was coming from right across the NGO sector. You know, there were phone calls coming in left, right and centre of people just checking in on each other to say, is everyone okay? Because the narrative was just ugly. The narrative was ugly and no one really knew what to expect. And, you know, you all know that I look to the skies, I genuinely do, and look for understanding in the landscapes that I see. And it was really hard to see through some of those grey clouds.
It was genuinely really distressing, particularly in that last week when, you know, what we saw, you know, the culture wars flare up again deliberately as an election ploy, as a political ploy.
Yeah.
What do you think that impact had on the end result? You know, we're as I've heard someone say, picking over the entrails, which is a really ghastly way of saying it, but I think we do have to, because we do have to learn from this experience as well, don't we?
We do. And one of the conversations I had, and again, it was from someone from the NGO sector, was at the end of the day, she believes in the humanity of Australians. And some of what the narrative we were seeing was inhumane. And, you know, whoever thought that on Anzac Day we would see a narrative that supported the behaviour of a neo-Nazi, the people that we fought against, the people that Australians, including our own mob, were willing to die to prevent the spread of that ideology. When did we ever think that we'd be seeing that splashed across the papers as a way of combating a welcome to country, a kind welcome to country that the RSL supported, that our servicemen and women, because we've got them too, that one call, that when they're in those rooms, when they're out there, when they're listening to the stories of the fallen, that's the one that makes them feel safe. And it was just an extraordinary moment in time. And what I hear and what I had been hearing, and I know anyone who's heard SNAICC speak, we often say Australians are sick of it. They are sick of the nonsense. And that is, we had heard that. We had heard whispers that polling was showing that people didn't like the ugly speak and that they didn't like ugly behaviours. Now, I didn't know which of those polls to pick or listen to, and I didn't know how much trust to put in any of those polls. But believe it or not, my husband, he likes a flutter. And he said, you might want to go and look at Sportsbet. And I looked at Sportsbet, and those polls were showing something quite extraordinary. And they were showing that Australians were highly likely going to bet on a Labor government, and not by a small margin, by a big margin. I became addicted to looking at that page.
I know you kept sending me the screenshots.
I screenshotted everybody.
Which is a remarkable odds.
Absolutely. They went from a negative to, $12 to 1.
Basically, if you were a coalition in that home stretch of the election, you were running on three legs according to the odds.
According to Sportsbet, of all places. And I think, again, my husband doesn't do the sort of work that I do. He's very much, for lack of a better term, the common man. And he said the reason he's a tradie. He's a tradie. And he said the reason he was looking at those polls is the people that he speaks to as a tradie were telling him a different conversation. And he said, I just thought, I'll just check what it's doing. And he goes, this is the common man that bets at Sportsbet, and they're very rarely wrong. And come the night of the election, I turned off. I actually turned off. I just couldn't do it. But having said that, I still checked the Sportsbet page, and there was a point there where it said 19 to 1, and then it was something like 29 to 1. And I went, that's extraordinary. And next minute, the phone started buzzing and people are going, you might want to check the result. Oh my goodness, what a moment in time.
It was remarkable, but also what I found reassuring in a way, or gave us some hope, was when the then opposition leader, Peter Dutton, gave what was a very gracious speech in defeat,
wasn't it?
I thought. Bit late, but better late than never. But what was really remarkable and instilled a sense of hope back in me was the very almost defiant acknowledgements of country given by Senator Penny Wong and Anthony Albanese on Saturday night. Also hearing the Prime Minister reference closing the gap and reference early education and care was really, really, I think, lit that little flame of hope in me. But what about you? What did you reckon?
Oh, look, yes to all of those things. I too noticed the incredible graciousness from the opposition leader in his, farewell speech or acknowledgement speech. And, I think, someone who works in a job like mine always has to be, for lack of a better term, centrist, right? I've got to see the best in all political parties. I've got to be able to see where the pathway in each of those opportunities. And there was something in the graciousness that I went, okay, maybe we might have turned a corner. Maybe we might have turned a corner. And there was something in the power of that acknowledgement of country that just made people yell and scream and said, no, we don't need to be scared. Because that is what I'd been hearing heading into the federal election, that people, for the very first time, Aboriginal people were scared of an election result. And that's saying a lot, considering how our children are often picked up and battered in those election processes. So it was also, as you say, incredibly encouraging knowing that there were remarkable commitments to early education and care coming through. But again, where we have the big gap, and every single party had this big gap, and that was the commitment to keeping children safe in their own homes. Where was the commitment to that massive policy framework, safe and supported, that we know is critical to ensuring the strength of our families, critical to ensuring that we shift the dialogue on our children, and critical to to stopping the flow of children into horrific positions like child detention.
And as you always say, Catherine, closing the gap starts with our children. So the work at keeping children safe, keeping children with family, keeping children with community, it all starts in the early years. So I guess, I know we have a lot of work to do to get the new government, all members of the new government, to reach those ambitions.
Yeah. And again, it is one of those things that, again, you look at the political landscape, it is a completely different shape, one that we've never had to navigate before. And there are some incredible opportunities in that. But there's also, again, I've got to read that landscape and go, who are we going to lean into, prod and poke, to help move the incredible beasts of machinery that government are? So the only way we can do that is by leaning into the government that's in play, really, and saying, step up. At this moment in time, no one has ever had the opportunity to make change like you do. But the only way you're going to do it is to move and move fast. And again, my job is to look at that landscape and go, election cycles run in 3 years. The first year is the year for change. The first 100 days is the most critical time of change. We know that come year 2, the conversations start to soften, and we know year 3, we head back into election cycles, and that is why the first 100 days and the first year are so critical. So it really will be hitting the ground hard, making sure that we're taking to government practical solutions for closing the gap, practical solutions that will make an impact for our communities and our families, and really leaning into what's required to move the beast of machinery that governments are.
Exactly right. I think, and you're talking about the beasts of machinery and getting policy levers, but it's also about engaging, I think, politicians' hearts and minds, elevating them. And, we've seen, as you said, some really ugly debates in this election campaign. And when I think about it, I was thinking a lot of it based on so much misunderstanding and misinformation, if we take acknowledgements and welcomes to country, with people just not knowing what they are, and particularly thinking about the impact on children. But I think nearly every early education centre, every preschool, every kinder, as far as I know, now does an acknowledgement of country. And you see the kids and hear the kids doing it, and it's just really beautiful. It's not a big deal. And when you talk to them about what it means to them and what they're saying, it's just really talking about practical reconciliation. I reckon that's where it starts.
Oh, look, I love going, whenever I get the opportunity to visit an early education care service or a school, my heart just nearly explodes at watching how proud children are to do those acknowledgements. And every now and then it's also a child that belongs on that country and they get to do a welcome. And I heard a funny story the other day, actually, that it comes from my own family. And my little granny, who's 5, was at the opening of a yoga centre of all things. And someone was up the front doing a welcome to country and mentioned that she was Aranda. And so Tildy at 5 heard that and jumped up the front and said, "Can I have the microphone?" And the old auntie gives her the microphone. She says, "My name's Matilda and I'm Aranda too." So that is what's coming through from children. And we also know that things like the language learnings and teachings that our children are able to access, schools and early childhood services always report how popular those courses are. I know even in Alice Springs, when you're walking down the street, you hear younger children practicing those words and bringing those words back into mainstream conversation. You know, you often talk about Aboriginal English, but to be perfectly honest, if you're in Alice Springs, everyone understands the word itcha and everyone understands the word weir. Everyone knows kapi, everyone knows quadja, and those the ones I've just given you are no and water because they're easy ones. But imagine what that's going to look like if we continue to celebrate and our children continue to grow from hearing and learning language and culture.
And as you said, they all know they're on Aranda land. Most of them know they're little Yiperinas, little caterpillars from being born on Aranda land. And they take such great pride in that, in knowing who they are. If the non-Aboriginal children as well are really proud of knowing who they are and where they fit in.
Yeah, that's right. And I do remember, when we had the Yiperinia Festival, and while it was a long time ago, and that old Grandpa Rabunja was out there and using the words of "you're all little Yiperinyas," how that changed the landscape going, because it really did say, while we're still here and while we still practice our culture and while we're still very proud of what makes us unique, we love sharing, we love embracing other people, and we love nurturing and sharing how we nurture with other people.
Also, I was reflecting, Catherine, when we were talking about this as well, about they're the truths of those children as well, aren't they? The welcomes and the acknowledgements, and when the children do it and when they say what impact it has and what it means to them, they're telling their story, they're telling their truths. And, of course, truth-telling is still one of the pillars of the Uluru Statement.
It is. And certainly until we can start telling our truths and creating the opportunities for those truths to be told, we're going to have misunderstanding. And one of the things I witnessed as we were heading into the election was actually, like all Australians, I have a very diverse family with lots of different views. And one of my uncles put this strange post up after Anzac, actually, and normally I just, normally you can't be at every bar fight, right? For lack of a better term, you can't step up to every single argument or you'd run out of time in the day.
And you're exhausted.
And this one I just went, you know what, I'm going to call it. And I thought about how I was going to call it. And I had 2 options. One was to go full attack mode, and the other one was just to say, I am really disappointed. And that's the pathway I chose. And I went, I am really disappointed because you have completely misunderstood this. And perhaps what you need to do is just do a little bit of deep digging. And I got this 2-page message on Messenger, and I'm like, I'm not going to open it. I'm not going to open it because I just don't have the energy in me. And I went, no, you poked the bear. Take a look at what it was. And this family member went and looked it up, and it was a 2-page apology for not understanding, not showing enough empathy to go and look, and how terrible he felt about not trying. And now that he understood, he would use that, because not only could he do better, but he knew a whole heap of other Australians that could do better too. And that is the impact of truth-telling. That is the impact of creating an environment where Australians themselves can go on a bit of an exploration, because at the end of the day, they are human. All Australians are humans. And when you hear what has happened to our families, when you hear what the impact of colonisation has truly been from the mouths of Aboriginal people, there is no way you cannot be moved by it.
Very true. And I think also when you can't fail to be moved when you hear of the successes and the richness and just, the everyday wins.
Yeah, absolutely.
That are out there as well. It's something that we should take great pride in.
Oh, absolutely.
And, well done. Changed at least one heart, one mind.
At least one heart.
And that's going to snowball.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one can only hope. And it's funny, isn't it? Even as someone like myself, it was a learning lesson for me to go, maybe the way you talk to some of those people is slightly different. And again, that's part of what we do in the advocacy part of SNAICC, is working out how we have conversations that make people uncomfortable but bring them along on the journey.
Exactly. And it's not always easy. It can be tough for us as SNAICC as well. But hey, it's what we do and gets me out of bed in the morning. I know it's what gets you out of bed in the morning as well. Also, what gets you out of bed is, you're singing. Last time we talked, you gave us a bit of a rendition of The Devil Went Down to Georgia.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at that now, that same song, and so here we go, I'm giving you another chance to sing. I'm so generous. But what does that metaphor mean now? Like, before, when we sang it before, it was leading up to an election, how was it going to look? Bit of, trepidation. But now, where's the devil sitting now, Catherine Liddle?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? And I'm glad you said that. I promise you I'm not going to break out into song.
No, go on, do it.
It's very hard.
Do it.
But it is true. I was overwhelmed with stress, and I think I've had it described to me many times as one of my strengths is I am an intuitive leader, and intuitive can make it sound like you're a bit magic, but in actual fact what it means is you're listening to multiple inputs and you're able to synthesize them, and you're able to recognize patterns in behavior is effectively what an intuitive leader means. And my intuition would not let go of that song, and when I think about it now, in hindsight, Johnny won. Johnny won that golden guitar, and Johnny beat the devil with all of his power. And I suspect what it was I was listening to those phone calls of people that were ringing up and just checking in on Aboriginal people during a time of great distress. I was listening to young people when they were talking about a different world and not a world that we saw. I was listening to the cheers of women in particular when they said, look what's happening in early childhood education and care. This is awesome. And I was listening into the diversity of Australian voices that was saying, we're aspiring to an incredible future. We don't know what it looks like because technology is changing, the global landscape is shifting, but we're leaning into something that could be exciting. So my gut is that is what I was hearing, and that's why that particular song was resonating with me, because if you apply it, and while the devil's a bit harsh, what it really was there is a framework or an institution here that's a bit scary and is used to beating the common man. And in actual fact, democracy is about enabling the common man to have a vote, and that's all people to have a vote, including us mob. And that's what I take from that. Johnny won.
Johnny won, and now we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
A lot of work ahead of us, and I am really looking forward to it. The future looks very bright. From a policy landscape, the future looks very bright, but the work will be really solid. We have to make sure that, some of the things we're leaning into include legislate that national commissioner. Here was the commitment in the last election. It wasn't fully implemented before the election, which, let's be very clear, meant it was really at risk. But you now have 3 years push on it, make sure we have the highest accountability mechanism available to our children, fully empowered, fully legislated, and ready to hit the ground and work alongside our communities, work alongside our children, work alongside government to truly shine a light onto the things that are causing harm. We also know that we need those commitments to a new funding model for our early childhood education and care services. Now, we hear, even from the NGO sector, that the model of care that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people use is the gold standard. So what we need now is a recognition of that and the investment that says, in order for you to genuinely build the services that are right for you, you need to be able to develop in a way that suits you. Now, that means that we're not saying this KPI sits over in this box over here and this KPI, and I'm going into boring speak here, means that you do it this way. It says, what do you need? What do you need? How do we know it's working? And let's make this happen. So we know that there are still some big pieces of work needed to push that. We know that the closing the gap statistics relating to children are still something that can only be described, even though I'm sounding positive, the only way to describe them is a national disgrace. Now, again, it's for someone like me who is across the figures, consistently across the figures. What I know is that since the national agreement was put into play and since we started seeing changes in how we're able to work with government and how services are able to start pulling levers that they never had access to before, we're starting to see channels in that tide of overrepresentation opening up. And across the board, we are returning more children to their families than ever before. But the biggest problem here is that tidal wave is bigger than the channels that are opening. So without a true commitment to transferring services to Aboriginal control, we're never going to be able to combat that tidal wave, because it's our services that invest in what children and families need to be strong. We know that currently in the landscape, the majority of the dollars, and I hate talking about dollars when we're talking about children, but we know that the services that get the bulk of the funding to care for our families are the ones that do the least work with our families. That just beggars belief.
It is. It makes no sense. And Catherine Liddle, we have got some work to do. We better start going and knocking on those ministerial doors and telling the story to them. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, podcast number 2, done and dusted.
Done and dusted. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you, Catherine.
And thank you for anyone who's tuning in.